You texted me immediately afterwards.
Yes.
That you had strong opinions and that it's going to come out on the podcast. So here you go. Here's the platform. I'm going to shut up for at least a minute and let you go.
I don't even know if I have a minute because like the audacity of the College Football Playoff Committee and the audacity of, I was going to bring that up, of the NCAA, right? To leave a undefeated Florida State out solely, you can argue whatever you want, but if Jordan Travis is there, they're in. Like, there's no shot. Solely because their quarterback got injured, who yet wasn't even a Heisman candidate. He wasn't in the top 4.
Yeah, but are you arguing that Florida State was the same with or without him? Did you watch the 2 games without him, though? You know
I did, which they won both of them. Well, their defense, though.
Florida's terrible, and they almost lost to Florida. Louisville's not that good.
But Texas A&M is also not that good. Or not Texas A&M. Why am I blanking on the name? The Alabama just almost lost to. Texas Tech? Who did Alabama just almost? Auburn, sorry. I always forget.
Yeah, but then they came back and beat Georgia.
They did. But Florida State also beat 4 teams inside the top 25 this year.
Okay, their best win of the season.
Florida State.
Best win of the season was LSU. Agree or disagree?
I mean, from a standpoint, yes.
Yeah, because you're saying they beat those. That's the 5th best SEC team this year. So their best win, which was a good win, and they looked great with Jordan Travis. Listen to this. Without them, you take away 2 plays of the game. They had 55 passing yards against Louisville. 55 passing yards, and then they ended up with, 100 and I don't want to shortchange them at all. So I'm going to look this up, make sure I get the exact number that we're dealing with. They had 164 rushing yards. 2 plays, one was 73 and one was 21 yards. So if you take those 2 plays away,
you can't just take plays away.
I know, I'm just saying, but I'm saying like the rest of the game minus 2 big plays. That's 55 passing yards and 70 rushing yards against Louisville. You can, like, in your right mind, can you say that Florida State has an actual shot of beating Michigan?
No, they're not.
Yeah, and it's what they keep saying, which I get from Florida State. It sucks if you're a Power 5 team and you go undefeated and you don't get to go to the playoffs. That
correct.
Sucks. But the reality is there are 4 teams, and so someone's getting left out, right? You know what I mean?
Always.
So it's like, it sucks if you did like an emergency play-in game and you add maybe Georgia and Florida State and them and Alabama and Texas play in and go play Washington and Michigan. I get that. But from my side, because this is what I predicted during the ACC championship, because I'm like, Florida State looks terrible. I don't think it matters in this game whether they win or lose, because Alabama had beaten Georgia. So Georgia, you got the 2-time national champ that hadn't lost in like 700 days. And
27
then Alabama,
games, right? 28?
Yeah. Alabama goes in and beats them. So can you really say, and Alabama's loss was early in the season of Texas, who's also in the playoff picture. So can you really say that Alabama doesn't deserve to go in? Then you've got Texas, who just won the Big 12, and they had a head-to-head win against Alabama. So now you've got 2 teams, and how are you going to really choose between those? Are you going to leave? I understand people are upset about SEC bias, whatever, but the reason it's biased is because they just keep winning. They're better than every other conference. So you're going to really leave them out?
Yeah, but the problem also is they both have a loss. And yes, it was good teams, 100%. Yeah. But they also have a loss, which like typically in most college football playoffs, right? If you have a loss, like it doesn't matter if you lose to Tim Tebow's Florida Gators, like,
right.
You know, you're not going to make the college football playoff. And so that's the part that like, I understand why they left Florida State out, right? Like I understand that, but based on like the principle of the game and of the NCAA championship and of the playoff committee, like you should never leave a team. Like, because here's the thing. Yes, they didn't look as good, but they still beat the 14th ranked team in the country. Yes, they didn't look great. They didn't look phenomenal. And yes, they're hurting without Jordan Travis, no doubt, who ran the offense for 80% of the season. But it's like they still beat a 14th ranked team in the country. Like,
I understand Louisville's ranked 14th. They looked so bad. Louisville looked terrible.
But that's also because Florida State has a phenomenal defense.
No, yeah, so Florida State had a good defense. Louisville looks bad. They beat Duke. That's not really a good win. And it's like one of the best ones they have. Like they just aren't good. Like the rest of the conference isn't that good. Yeah, so here's what sucks for Florida State. They go out of their way to schedule LSU, which is good, because they're trying to build up their strength of schedule. Then they have a great win against LSU. And so it's like that's where I get it. It's like from their side, it sucks. Like they've done everything they can. Jordan Travis got hurt. You can't really control that. You know what I mean? Like it sucks from them. But then my thing is if it gets down to one team. So interesting thought. I think if there was another undefeated team, Florida State probably gets in and it's 4 undefeated. But I think because you're down to one slot left and you're between Alabama and Texas, you start looking at it. Again, you've got Alabama that they also beat LSU by pretty much the exact same margin as Florida State.
Texas
like it was almost the same score.
Yeah.
Then you got Texas going head to head. So you can't say that head to head in the regular season doesn't matter because that's a bad path for them to take. So are then you going to say that Alabama also beating LSU and beating Georgia, which is probably the best team, are you going to say that Texas goes over them? And so I think once you start pinning those two together, you realize it's a lose-lose. And that's when I think Florida State comes back in the conversation. It's like, well, honestly, it's a lose-lose if we're going Texas or Alabama. Florida State becomes the easier option. Whereas if I think say Texas never played Alabama and they're undefeated, I think then it just goes Florida State goes in. You've got 4 undefeated conference champions. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Where like...
Yeah, once again, the college football commit it's a very tough decision because I mean you never really know, but Florida State playing Michigan probably not going to be
so bad because I get what you're saying, but they look so bad.
Yeah, but it's probably not like you said. I mean, Michigan might win by 3 scores. Like it might not even be a fun playoff game, right? Mm-hmm. Like in the semis.
And again, this is where we talked about with TCU. That's where. Unfairly, Florida State's getting hurt again because of the TCU game. Even though they won a playoff game last year,
true. Yeah.
They got so annihilated by Georgia.
And there is some SEC bias, I think for sure. But here's the thing. Georgia's schedule was a little bit tougher. Not much, but a little bit tougher than like FSU's, right?
Right.
It wasn't head over heels tougher.
Georgia had one of the easiest SEC schedules all year.
But Georgia wins that game. They're 13-0. And guess what? They're the number 1 overall seed. The number 1 overall seed in that tournament.
Yeah, but you're acting like losing Jordan Travis. They just were not the same team with him and without him.
That's also true, but if
Penix is down, Washington's not in. I would stand by that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's
you know what I mean? Like if the flips happened 2 weeks ago, and granted I don't know because Oregon's a good team, so that would be interesting because they were playing them, but all else the same.
I think I'm sorry, but like for Alabama, for example, this is just such.
You're just mad because you don't think they're going to win for another 10 years, and you're like, oh wait, it could happen this year.
No, it just pissed me off about Alabama because like the fact that you take Auburn, you have to throw a 34-yard pass with seconds to go, literally to beat Auburn. Like that's a very lucky win to beat Auburn, and you lose. Now, don't get me wrong, Texas is a good team. Wasn't a bad loss, but you also lose. And yes, you beat Georgia, which is great. But like, you can also make the counter argument all day long that like they barely could compete with Auburn or barely beat Auburn, and then they lost to Texas. So like, and who was Texas lost to?
Oklahoma, which was you remember we complained about it.
That's
because
right.
It was a bad loss because they played not to lose at the end.
Correct.
And shot themselves in the foot. So I mean, that was stupid.
You know, and Alabama and Texas's schedules are harder, yes, and they're in the SEC, or Alabama's in the SEC. So, like, yeah, of course, the schedule's going to be harder. It's just on principle to win. Like, the thing that sucks is, like, even if Jordan Travis doesn't go down, you have to think they're in, right? You just have to think Florida State's in the top 4.
Right.
Also, if Clemson's good this year and Florida State beats Clemson, I think they're also in the top 4.
No, that's where I'm with you, is it sucks for Florida State. They went out of their way to schedule LSU.
Yep.
They beat them.
Yep.
They went undefeated. They won a Power 5 conference. You can't ask for any more from them, which is where it sucks.
Right.
Like, I'm going to argue that this was the right decision, but that doesn't make it suck less. It's also, again, they have a 4-team playoff with 5 Power 5 conferences. Like, it's changing, but the system itself is just flawed.
But that's the first time that an undefeated Power 5 conference champion got left out.
Right.
Right. So I think that was
And then, again, people have been saying it all the time, but Ohio State when 2016, I guess 2014, whenever it was, when they lost their starting quarterback and they stepped in, they looked better than Florida State did without Jordan Travis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, again,
I'm glad they left George out though.
Yeah, I am too.
Yeah.
George should have been out, even if. But this is where it's weird. It's like they still probably are one of the best 4 teams, but that's where it just gets so they're like stressing the best 4 more this year as a like cop out to try to explain.
Correct. They've never done this before, right? Like they've always went by like records, and if you're undefeated and you win a Power 5, like you're in, and like.
Which is why I stand by it though. I think that if Texas hadn't lost to Oklahoma, I think at that point you probably have Florida State in, and you just leave Alabama out
because they lost.
Because it was a loss, and then you know what I mean. It's a clear cut decision. I think the problem
I hate Alabama.
I just think the problem was you have Alabama and Texas that both have a very compelling case. And then once you start trying to decide between the two of them, that's when FSU, I think, comes back into the conversation. Whereas if there was a clear-cut 4, even if Alabama gets left out and they're better than Florida State, it's like, look, we've got undefeated conference champions, and you're the only one that's not. It's easy. And they don't want as much messy.
It was awful. I mean, I would love to see the conversations in that room.
Yeah.
You know, like between the committee.
But they had 5 people from the ACC there, including the head in the committee, which is interesting too.
Yeah. Well.
But, I mean, you have a good point too. If Clemson was good this year.
Yeah, like Clemson's top 10 in the country, and ACC Florida State
was just
wins.
Weak again this year.
Dude, they were. I mean, really. I mean, Duke was arguably, besides Florida State, the best.
Because we thought
ACC
UNC
team
was going to look good. They fell apart. Terribly.
Dude, they were up to like 12th in the country or something. Like they were up high.
I know.
But then they lost a couple bad games. One to Minnesota. Not Minnesota. I forgot who they lost to, but it was a bad loss.
The one thing I do have to say is I'm tired of reading RG3's tweets.
Yeah.
Because after the Oregon-Washington game, he's like, I'm just going to say it. Both of them need to be in. It's like, if you lose to a team twice in the regular season,
you're out.
You do not deserve it.
No, you're out. But that, dude, I actually wish that would have happened. I wish Oregon beats Washington. Can you imagine that? What do you like? What? What do you do in that situation? Like Michigan's the only one that's in. Like lock.
I mean, I think at that point,
right? Like if Oregon actually did beat
honestly, maybe
Washington, then you go, there's 3 teams that deserve to be in that have one loss. Florida State's probably still out.
Or are they?
That's what I'm saying.
That would have been an interesting one, I think.
That would have made it, like, I feel like this is by far the toughest it's been in a few years. Like top 4. Dude, but if you had Oregon at 12-1 too, that would have made it like even just like a little bit tougher.
I honestly didn't think about that at all.
Yeah.
Because it happened first.
Because Washington, since Washington won lock, Michigan won lock.
Yeah, and it was a Friday night.
Those two
in
lock.
Good.
Yeah.
Also, okay, Ohio State was a big win, but the Big Ten's trash this year.
Dude, it is.
They were a 20-point favorite in the conference championship game.
Against Iowa.
I mean.
Iowa's worse than Louisville. I think Louisville would have beat Iowa.
If McCarthy goes down, then Florida State has a way better case than Michigan.
I know. But like Michigan, like once again, that's what.
Because you could also argue with Ohio State that they were just over. Like maybe it wasn't that big of a win; they were just overrated.
Like
because they didn't play anyone. You know what I mean?
Dude, that's what I'm saying. It's like you could take this so many different directions. Because then you go, if you start doing that, then you go, wait, all of a sudden, because I don't know what the official strength of schedule was for Michigan, but like then you go, wait, all of a sudden, Michigan's really big win was against Ohio State, and like then it's like, well, should Florida State be like, I don't know, dude. It gets like, you can go down so many rabbit holes.
Well, also, strength of schedule is so much harder to do when there's 100 teams than if, the NFL with 32.
Yes.
Because
I'm looking up right now.
Take the SEC right now. People are arguing that it's a down year for the SEC. But also, if you're just all playing each other constantly, you know what I mean? You have 3 hard games to prepare for. Florida State gets, again, LSU was the beginning of the year, but like say it was the middle of the year coming in. South Carolina's got to be up there.
Number 1. Dude, according to sportsbettingdime.com.
It was a brutal schedule this year.
Yep.
Honestly, we should have been in this conversation.
This is 5. This is 3.
At 5 and 5.
Alabama
7.
Crimson Tide 3. Michigan was 10. This says.
Yeah.
Wow, Tar Heels, they were 13th.
But you know what I mean? Like, so much of that is based
Michigan
off, like if you're
3?
not playing each other that much, so much of it is based off of what they decided preseason.
I know, dude, it really is.
So final thought on this from me, and then I want to see if you have anything else, is it sucks for Florida State. I would be so upset if I was on their team. They did everything they could.
Well,
but
you know what?
They're just not as good right now, I think.
But here's the thing, dude. Here's the thing that this decision is like the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
It's like, here's the thing that this decision just brought into play. If you could be the best college football team in America that year, and your quarterback goes down in the conference finals, you're done, right? Like if it's a Heisman QB, like you're done. It's over. Like that's what this is saying. It's like you could be 13-0, win a Power 5, right? But if your quarterback goes down and he's a big piece of the offense, you're out.
And our draft today, we're going to do best college quarterbacks from the last 25 years. But we'll realize with it, it's like you get one or two good ones or like one come in, you can change an entire team.
Well, you can, but also you can also like make them miss the college football playoff.
Well, right. What I mean though is it's like you just get one good quarterback to come in and you can go and make a run. Whereas then if you lose them, it's such a big piece. It sucks,
but that's what that's saying.
What it should have been, it should have just been Georgia plays FSU and Alabama plays Texas as a play-in game to play Washington and Michigan.
100%.
Just doing, who doesn't want another week?
100%.
Just do an emergency 1 week edition.
And 100%. You can wherever you rank it. But yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
just freaking do it because like, that's what drives me insane. I mean, I think that's the part that bothers me the most. And the last thing I'll say is like the precedent that this set, because you could do everything right in the regular season and one of your key players goes down and then all of a sudden you're going to miss the college football playoff.
Well,
I mean, that's exactly what that's saying.
I think two things. One, since it's already changing, the playoffs, they were able to, I think, maybe stress more of who do we think the better team is, because we're like, if this was 3 or 4 years or before they decided to expand it, then it would be everything's breaking loose, like all hell's breaking loose. You know what I mean?
That's true. That's a good point.
But I think because of that, they were able to stress a little bit more. But the other thing is, I know, I see what you're saying, but I do think that if, like, just the eye test alone, Florida State was drastically different. You could have a backup that steps in. I mean, even look at the Bengals this week, you know?
Maybe Joe Burrow's not the answer.
Maybe he's not. Like, Browning looked pretty good.
He did look good.
There was nothing from Florida State that looked like that. Like, Florida's not good this year. They almost dropped to them. Louisville was not that good, and they almost dropped. So I think it's not just the injury. It's the injury plus the way they responded offensively. Defense still looks good.
I don't know,
it sucks.
though.
It sucks.
Yeah. I just don't. I don't know if Florida, yes, I'll agree with that comment. Like, you can't say you played bad against a top 25 team and, like, I don't know. You know, like a top 15 team. Like, you're like a 14th team in the country. Like, they still won. Yes, they didn't look as dynamic, but, like, you know, they're a top 15 team in the nation and they beat them. So, like, I don't know. Anyway, it is what it is, right? We're not changing anything.
Unless they decide to add an extra game.
Dude, that's what they need to do.
I mean, no one would have been mad about that.
No, nobody. Dude, if you're Florida State, though, what does the head coach say? That's so tough.
I know.